Giant's Citizen Kabuto, developed by Planet Moon Studios and published by Interplay Entertainment in the year 2000, is a game that is nothing if not ambitious. It is a third-person action game, with a story mode consisting of 3 mini-campaigns, each with a unique playable character. First we have the mechs, who are basically British hamsters in Space Marine armor. They have the most traditional third-person action campaign. Next up are the Sea Reapers, magical water people who are functionally the overlords of this planet. These guys add some wrinkles to the fold, giving you the ability to cast spells and fight in melee. The third and final campaign is that of the eponymous Kabuto. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that the title of this game confused the hell out of people when it came out, and most likely still does to this day. Well, to get to the heart of what the hell a Kabuto is, I'll have to start the story from the beginning. Once upon a time, there were a couple of mech buddies on their way to the beautiful planet Majorca for a holiday, but one of the ships crashed on a mysterious planet along the way. Seeing this as a simple detour, fellow mechs Baz and Tell go down to rescue them, but not before too long are stuck with more than they bargained for. Upon arrival, Baz runs into a smarty named Timmy, or Ahmed, who has some information on the whereabouts of where Mr. Basil's friends are. The Smarties are a tribal race of little idiots who have been subjugated by another more advanced race called the Sea Reapers. In their quest to rescue their friends and get back on the track for their holiday, the mechs have become increasingly embroiled in the problems of the planet. So again, you may be asking, what the hell is a Kabuto? Well, Kabuto is a terrifying beast that the Sea Reapers control with magic. Magic fueled by the sacred art of Smarty sacrifice. So, in a nutshell, the Sea Reapers rule the planet with the use of Kabuto, who is only appeased by Smarty sacrifice. The mechs have stumbled upon this cycle and have decided to do something about it. The 3 campaigns show you a little piece of the puzzle, ultimately converging together in the climax. This whole thing is framed in a 2000s dude where's my car kind of format, the situation growing more and more abstract and ridiculous the further you get from the beginning. The story here is nothing groundbreaking and is very much just a vessel for doling out missions and gags to the player. But when this came out, I remember playing at least the mech campaign and finding it pretty funny overall. It's kind of got the Shrek thing going on, clever innuendos and insinuations with a bit of slapstick and gross out humor in there for good measure. There aren't many characters to keep track of, and who they are never amounts to being that important. So what is left here is just a fun time that doesn't require much commitment from the player. And that is the feeling that has stuck with me after beating Giants. It's ambitious for the time, huge maps, squad commands, open-air gameplay, base building, and an admirable commitment to storytelling, but like most ambitious titles, never really lives up to any of its good intentions. At the same time though, it never truly offends or overstays its welcome either. Hello everyone, my name is Stone Skeleton, and this is my review of Giant's Citizen Kabuto. So Giants has a campaign that ran me about 10 or so hours, which doesn't include the couple of crashes and whatnot that I endured. Something I'll get out of the way right now is that Giants has a complete lack of a save system. Instead, missions will unlock as you complete them, allowing you to select them if you quit the game later. There is no mid-mission saving, but in the game's defense, most of the missions are broken up into checkpoints every 15 or so minutes, so you'll never be losing too much time, but just enough to be frustrating. Before I talk about the 3 different campaigns and how they play, I think the most immediate thing to talk about here are the graphics. They're not the best, and this time there is no stellar art direction in a cape to save them. Environments are large, which give you a sense of scale in the play space, but it seems to be at the expense of any real detail. The team's use of colour does come in as a bit of a saving grace, the contrast making the world feel more alien. Kind of gives off a Morrowind vibe, which I'm all down for. Character models are a little better, quite muddy but still charming in their own right, and it is easy to distinguish who is who. The voice work, though, is what really carries the characters, which is well performed all around.
Come on, we need to find on Reg.
Oh, the Reapers will probably have him now, Mr. Baz.
What?
Oh, yes. Just yesterday, a Reaper squadron captured my whole village. I was only able to escape because of these old smarty mine shafts we've been traveling through.
Well, where the bloody hell would they have taken him?
On the topic of graphics, I'd like to mention that I'm using the unofficial 1.5 patch for the game, which seems to have overexposed it quite a bit on my end, but doesn't look too much different from the other footage I've seen online, so I guess I'll just have to run with it. Okay, for campaigns here, we start off with the mechs, which is probably the best campaign of the three. You play as Baz, one of the holidayers who has made a detour to pick up his crash-landed friends. In the beginning, you'll only start off with a pistol, but the game cleverly layers on new gameplay mechanics with each new objective. The game is doing its teaching through objectives. First you get the hang of shooting, then it'll let you engage with your jetpack, eventually layering on new gizmos for you to experiment with, such as shields and decoys. Your character has a 4-weapon limit, so sometimes there are decisions that need to be made around which weapon to bring on which mission, but in most cases the game has a loadout in mind that it wants you to take. There are some missions that are nigh impossible to complete until you figure out the right combination, but the general rule of thumb is that if you just received a weapon or power, the game intends for you to use it in the objective that follows. The third-person shooting here is unremarkable at best and unremarkable at worst. It is a pure expression of unremarkable third-person shooting. You'll spend a lot of time sniping at turret installations and strafing to avoid fire, but not much more than that. Enemy variety is also pretty low, most likely due to the more multiplayer nature that this game was trying to get at. I actually struggle to come up with any particularly interesting encounters or set pieces that the game sets up. The missions blur into one another, with cutscenes played about every 20 minutes to remind you that there are still things worth seeing in the game. While you usually get a new weapon or upgrade roughly every mission, the flow of the missions for the mechs is generally to scout around your area, find enemy hardpoints, and slowly take apart the enemy's defense so you can get to the gooey objective in the center. The two main enemies you face here, the burrowing creatures known as the Rippers, and the humanoid enemies known as the Sea Reapers. The Rippers are rather basic, only consisting of 2 enemy types, and function as something as a fodder enemy, as they are the ones that drop the most health pickups per kill. The only building they'll have is a barracks, which is something that continuously spawns enemies until it is destroyed. The Sea Reapers have a smidge more variety, with enemies wielding different weapons, but the roster is still small. What makes them more dangerous than the Rippers is their use of turrets, which hit like trucks and have lock-on targeting. This is where carefully dismembering their bases come in, because if you begin an assault on the objective without taking care of these, you'll be on the fast track to restarting the level, son. As the levels are open in nature, I suspect the turrets were designed with the intention of stopping players who intended to bypass gameplay sections by using their jetpack to climb the geometry. While there is no reward for playing the game the proper way, there also isn't much joy of just skipping its gameplay entirely. Towards the end of the mech campaign, the game pulls out what I consider to be its most interesting trick: base building.
Good job, boyos! Now it's time to show you how to build a base. To guide you through the process, this is the Toby ZX81.
Hello, Max. Pick a Smarty up and drop him off on this pad here.
After blowing up a few Reaper bases, it's time for the mechs to craft their own, with the help of the Smarties who are fighting for liberation. To build your base, you must explore the area you're in to find a creature called a Vimp, which will be the food source for your Smarties so that they may work for you. You will also need to go around the island and collect Smarties to do the building. At this point in the story, you've saved a few of your mech buddies, which means you have access to squad controls. There are only 3 commands: attack, defend, and recall, but they get the job done. They can even pick up the Smarties too if you position them right, saving you a couple trips back to base. Once you have some Smarties and some Vimp meat, you can start building. The building selection is quite limited, but may have been larger in multiplayer. You can build yourself an item shop to stock up on supplies to keep you going as you venture out for resources, and shield walls to keep your place safe while you're out. After constructing all of the buildings available to you, you may build the final structure, the party house. It's a delightful little building where your Smarties congregate to have a proper drink. From here, you can construct a handful more interesting buildings, such as a helipad and turrets, which can be placed anywhere you choose as opposed to the main buildings which have set locations. While this is cool, it serves more to show you what the possibilities are in multiplayer, rather than for you to actually need this unlock. By the time you've got the party house in single player, you are most likely more than ready to roll into taking the objective. These base building missions can go for quite a while if it's your first time, and it can feel like the end of the world if you die when you're close to the end. Remember, the game only saves when you complete missions, but before you smash the Alt F4 button though, something the game doesn't tell you is that all of your buildings are saved when you restart the mission. If you've unlocked the party house but died on the way, it'll still be there, and you can just try again with your current base. This doesn't work if you exit the game and come back in though. This is now the format for the missions to come. Blow up a base, establish a new one, and then proceed to take the enemy's base.
To get to Sappho's secret palace, you'll need to steal a jet ski from the Sea Reaper base in the center of this island.
Okay, I'm ready.
Wait, little one. You must first find Smarties.
The Sea Reaper campaign follows almost the exact same structure as the mech campaign as well, introducing you slowly to the mechanics of the race and then giving you final exams toward the end of the campaigns. To be honest with you, up to this point, the single player mode hasn't been particularly great, but if you change your perspective and look at it like it was most likely intentioned as a multiplayer tutorial, then it's probably one of the most loving multiplayer tutorials ever made. Giants is thorough in teaching you the different aspects of its gameplay, which makes it all the more the shame I wasn't able to try the multiplayer. But at the same time, it's punching with the best when it comes to cutscenes. Before we get into the Sea Reaper campaign, I'd like to take a little break from harping on the game to really shine a light on just how damn funny it is. Nothing is taken too seriously, and it's a lot of fun seeing what parody or trope they'll poke fun at next.
What are you doing?
By taking my life, we shall become greater.
Actually, we won't.
What?
We won't become greater.
It's all right. I know what I'm doing.
Wait!
It's all about honor, you see.
Who is this moron? This is Yan, the samurai smarty.
Elfie, please come back safe.
Oh, that's got to be the sickest thing I've ever seen. Thanks to that poncy git there.
You don't really get this tone in games anymore. The nearest comparison I could give is Conker's Bad Fur Day, but Giants is perhaps a tad brow higher than the wisecracking scat-fighting squirrel. The Sea Reaper campaign is where the game starts to lose a bit of its luster. We're introduced to a new character here, Delphi, who is the evil Queen Sappho's well-meaning daughter who wants to join the fight to liberate the Smarties. You get a few new powers and ways to traverse the map, which is a change of pace, but quickly you notice the mission structure stays the same. Again, a great tutorial, as now you're learning how to play on the Sea Reaper side in asynchronous multiplayer, but the AI here is brain dead and doesn't function like a real player, so it isn't exceptionally challenging. The absence of the mechs is also felt here, the story moving at a slower pace with less characters. Missions can be long, and having to restart a mission can be incredibly painful. So while the cutscenes in Delphi's campaign are still quite good, there are less of them, meaning less humor breaks to keep you going. Delphi can move around faster than the mechs, so while repetitive, her campaign wouldn't have been all that bad if it wasn't for the Reaper ski missions. These are basically vehicle tutorials where you were required to do 4 or so of these dull as hell races in a row. I don't really know what the developers were going for here, because I was over it after just one race. I figured that the vehicle sections here were rare and a new thing back in 2000, so they had to start people off slowly to get them the hang of controlling the skis, but god damn. When you have to do 4 of these missions in a row with not an ounce of story in between, it makes you really wonder what you have left to look forward to. Well, the answer to that is the Kabuto campaign, and it ends up being the worst of them all. For the same reasons as the Sea Reaper campaign and then some of its own. First thing to be said is that there's basically no story to the Kabuto campaign, so the humour and charm that is at the very centre of the game is replaced by this lifeless giant simulator. This may be another one of those things that was jaw-dropping in 2000, but playing it today makes me want to cry a little bit from wanting it to be over. Kabuto just doesn't control that well, and the mechanics of playing it aren't that interesting. Base building has been replaced by a system of eating evil Smarties to grow larger, so your campaign is you starting as a wee baby Kabuto and growing in size in hopes of fighting the full-grown Kabuto that is set loose at the end of the mech campaign. We're now starting to get a clearer picture of how multiplayer probably went down. A team of mechs, a team of Sea Reapers, and most likely a solo player as Kabuto itself.
Well, that's a bloody morale boost, isn't it?
The mechs and Sea Reapers would be scouring the island for Smarties and Vimps, skirmishing against one another while Kabuto stomps around the island hunting for the other players. I could imagine this 3-way power dynamic being really interesting, balance being achieved through different player numbers for the different races. Alas, I live in Australia, mate, and have given up on trying to get any of my friends to pick this up. So if you have any multiplayer experience, please share in the comments. Back to the Kabuto campaign though, and yeah, that's actually it. You stomp around, growing larger and repeating objectives in some pretty ass-looking locations until you get to the end of the game where you will be switched back to playing as Baz for the final battle. The battle is pretty painless and over quick, which is how I'd sum up the game as a whole. Giant Citizen Kabuto is a game from my childhood that I look back on fondly. Coming back to it, it isn't as fun as I remember, but it is just as funny and ambitious as it lived in my memory. While the gameplay is kinda it is never outright bad. The campaign never hits any gameplay highs, but the humour and charm displayed in the first 2/3 of the game were worth the price of admission.
Oh, you're gonna love Planet Majorca. Sun, beer, and all the fish and chips you can eat.
Oh, Basil, you really know the way to a woman's heart.
They really just don't make games like this anymore. In terms of recommending it, it is pretty tough to say, as besides the humour and the ambition, nothing in this game really needs to be experienced. If you want a trip back to a simpler time of video games and want to try something you've never played though, I wholeheartedly recommend you give this a crack. At worst you lose 10 hours of your life, but you will become one of the elite dozen living humans today that have actually played the game. As always, thank you for watching and I'll see you next video.